now like to introduce our guest speaker for the evening. It's Supervisory Senior Resident Agent of the FBI Youngstown, John Stoll.
Good evening. When I first received the call from Chief Blystone asking if the FBI would provide a speaker for tonight's memorial, I had to ask myself, how long has it been since that terrible day? It took only a moment or two to remember that the year was 2001. It took a little longer to remember that it happened on a Tuesday, a very sunny Tuesday. Since then, about 30 million new Americans were born in our country. As these children grow up, we can't let the memory of the events of that September day be forgotten. Never. Many of us can recall our parents or grandparents telling us of what they were doing the day the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Let's do the same at 9/11. Tonight, I just want to take a few moments to tell you about how that day affected me and what was going on at your local Youngstown FBI office. If you haven't realized it yet, by my accent, I'm from Farmingdale, Long Island, a suburb of New York City. I can remember when the World Trade Center was under construction. The construction started in 1966, and everyone's excited because it was going to be the world's tallest building. Leaving the island on our annual family vacation, we would cross the horizontal bridge. From the bridge, we would notice the height of the towers had gained in the past year. When completed in 1973, we all noticed a much clearer reception on the televisions, as in those days they were pre-cable TV, and our TV broadcast reception was improved from the new antennas on top of the Twin Towers. One winter night in early 1977, I'd flown my wife-to-be around Manhattan in a rented plane. As we were required to stay below 1,000 feet, the Twin Towers still loomed over us about 300 feet. Later that year, on a clear summer day, she and I could see the towers from the horizon of the west end of Jones Beach on Long Island. What made that day notable was that it was the same day that George Willock scaled to the top of the South Tower like Spider-Man. In July 1993, my wife and I took our children to New York City and went up to the observation deck in the World Trade Center. It was the first and last time we would ever get so close. We took for granted that it would always be there. Our town back in Long Island had a volunteer fire department, just like the Cardinal Fire District here. My dad was one of its founding members and also a volunteer fireman. In fact, he served as a volunteer fireman for over 40 years. He would still do it today at age 78 if he was able. As a young kid hanging around the firehouse, I got to walk around with my dad, and got to know most of the firemen and looked up to them as heroes, which they were. Later, some of the kids from my high school became volunteer firemen there also. Two of them, Freddie Heffel and Richie Torello, later became New York City firemen, Richie rising to the rank of battalion chief. There were several others that served as volunteers and firemen, and at the same time, professional firemen in New York City. One in particular was Peter Gansey. Peter was the chief of the New York City Fire Department. He had 33 years on the job. I never knew him, but my dad did. In the Farmingdale Volunteer Fire Department, he was just one of the regular guys, fighting fires, cleaning gear, and performing all the other duties that a volunteer fireman does. Peter's last call of duty was on September 11, 2001. He was killed when the second tower collapsed. He had managed to get 50 of his men to safety before his life ended. He died a hero. He left behind a wife, a daughter, 2 sons, one of whom is a New York City firefighter. That day I sat in disbelief with a sickening feeling as I watched the South Tower collapse, knowing that guys I knew like Richie and Freddie were in there trying their best to rescue the people inside. 343 firefighters and paramedics were killed attempting to save those lives. 23 New York City police officers and 37 Port Authority police officers also died that day trying to rescue people. All were heroes. Thankfully, Richie and Freddie weren't among the casualties. Lenny Hatton, an FBI special agent in our New York City office, was also killed trying to rescue people. Lenny also left a wife and family behind. Another hero, he too was a volunteer fireman where he lived in New Jersey. Here in Youngstown, we were trying to make sense of what happened, receiving conflicting information, just like much as everyone else in the country was doing. As planes were ordered to land across the country, the Youngstown Warren Regional Airport started to receive commercial and military aircraft. Later that day, Youngstown Special Agents Jim McCann and Harry Fitzgerald went up to the airport to interview a crew of a Minnesota Air National Guard C-130. The crew had taken off from Andrews Air Force Base outside Washington, D.C. that morning, and during their climb out, watched in horror as American Flight 77 executed a sharp turn and plowed into the Pentagon. The following morning, we went up to the airport and nearby hotels where the diverted passengers spent the night. We were to interview passengers that may have seen something suspicious at their departure airport. Like everyone else at that time, doing something, anything, made us feel less helpless. It seemed like we tracked down hundreds of leads in the following weeks. Almost all turned out to be insignificant, but they all had to be covered. After United Flight 93 crashed into that field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, the FBI's Cleveland Division sent its evidence response team to the scene to help collect evidence and DNA. One of those agents was Special Agent Bonnie Rutherford of our Youngstown office. That day, a total of 2,974 people died in the combined attacks on the Pentagon, the World Trade Center, and United Flight 93. That's about the same population as the village of Poland. It was a sad day for all of us. The terrorists did their homework and stole something from our great country that we'll never get back. Sometimes bad things happen to good people. We all understand it, that it shouldn't be that way, but there's not much else we could do about it to make sure that they didn't die in vain and make sure that something like that never happens again. Let's not forget the heroic first responders who answered their last call. In a time when their city was most frightened, they displayed the courage and bravery we all needed to see. In a city known for its coldness, indifference, and toughness, they showed us the most ultimate and unselfish sacrifice. To the firefighters, paramedics, and police officers gathered here tonight to honor our fallen brothers and sisters, I ask you, what would they say to us if they could speak from the past? Be brave, be vigilant, don't worry about the small things, live your life to the fullest, love your family. I don't know. We'll never know. All I can say is let us always honor them and never forget what they did that day. Thank you.